Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, at least 115 children have been killed and 172 maimed in the latest of fighting and airstrikes in Yemen. We have the latest in a full report on tonight's program. Also tonight, a former powerful Syrian army general dies in hospital. We have the latest from the region on that tonight. In South Africa, shops in Malaya are shut down as another xenophobia boycott continues today. The UK and Australia and New Zealand mark Chabot and Asnick Day. Also, Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, has accused British Prime Minister David Cameron and other world leaders of failing to stand by Libya and contributing in part to the crisis in the Mediterranean. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan is on assignment tonight for the SHR Weekender. We have all those stories, plus an exclusive interview with Congressional runner Paul Chabot from the California's 31st Congressional District. The Evan Miller Report starts now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good Friday evening to you on this, April the 24th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller, and as I stated in our open, Corey Evan is on assignment tonight. He did send us some recordings from our Los Angeles Bureau for our business lawsuits across America and the entertainment report, as he is on assignment tonight for tomorrow's SHR Weekend News. That's at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific here on SHR Media. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get to the news tonight, just wanted to state, for those of you who missed this morning's broadcast of The Edge of Liberty with Dan Butcher and myself this morning, what a great broadcast, had a great time. Not enough time to get to everything today, but I certainly enjoyed being on live on AM 1360 WNJC over in Philadelphia, which was also simulcast as well on Pundit Press Radio and shrmedia.com, and we will be continuing to do that every Friday afternoon for those of you in the East, and for those of you out West, that's 12 in the East, and that's 9 a.m. in the West. So we hope you tune in each and every day to the Edge of Liberty here on the SHR Media Network, and for those of you over in Philadelphia on WNJC AM 1360. All right, folks, enough of that. Let's move on to the news tonight, because we have a very busy night ahead. As I stated, Paul Chabot will be joining us later in the program at 8:15 Eastern, 5:15 Pacific to discuss his run in California's 31st Congressional District. At least 115 children have been killed and 172 maimed in a month of fighting and airstrikes in Yemen. This coming from the UN Children's Agency, UNICEF. About half were killed by coalition bombings, the agency said, and others by mines, gunshots, and shelling. The Saudi-led coalition has continued airstrikes on rebel forces despite announcing the end of its air campaign. Houthi rebels and allied forces have been fighting forces allied to the government for several months. Saudi Arabia and allied Arab states have been carrying out airstrikes since March with the declared aim of restoring exiled President Abdur Mansur Hadi. The UN said on Friday that at least 551 civilians have been killed in the conflict, more than half of the overall estimated death toll. There are hundreds of thousands of children in Yemen who continue to live in the most dangerous circumstances, said Julian Harness of UNICEF's Yemen representation. The number of child casualties shows clearly how devastating this conflict continues to be for the country's children, he continued to say. A UNICEF spokesman in Geneva said the agency believed its figure of 115 was a conservative estimate, so the number was just a rough estimate, ladies and gentlemen. Back to the story, Johannes Faster Claw, the UN's humanitarian coordinator for Yemen, has warned that the country's escalating conflict had put its health system at an imminent risk of collapse. Mr. Van Disklaw said the violence that had disrupted supplies of food, fuel, water, and electricity across the country and left an estimated 2 million children unable to attend school. He called all parties in the conflict to facilitate the safe passage of aid to civilians. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led bombing campaign is targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels who have captured swaths of the country and their allies. It had supposedly declared an end to the aerial phase of its campaign on Tuesday, but resumed to launch airstrikes yesterday. Staying in the region in Syria, Rostam Ghazan, the Syrian general once considered the most powerful man in Lebanon and a key suspect in an assassination of a former Lebanese prime minister, Rafiat Hariri, has died in the hospital in the capital Damascus. A Syrian activist and local media reported today. Ghazi, in his early 60s, was once ahead of his military's powerful political security branch and one of Syrian president's Bashar al-Assad's most trusted generals. There was no official government comment, and the circumstances of his death remain unclear. Moving on to South Africa tonight, South African-owned shops in Malawi have remained closed after calls for a boycott from activists angered at recent xenophobic attacks. In the commercial capital of Blantyre, armed police guarded several leading South African chain stores. Several hundred Malawians have been evacuated from South Africa after the recent wave of xenophobic violence. At least 7 people have been killed and 5,000 left homeless since the attack started last month. Over to the UK now, where along with Australia and New Zealand, as they are set to remember soldiers from the two countries who fought at the Gallipoli War in Turkey during World War I. The events through Saturday will mark the centenary of the landing of Australian and New Zealand Army Corps in the Aztecs at Gallipoli on Aztec Day. It is estimated more than 11,000 from Australia and New Zealand alone were killed in the fighting which followed. Aztec Day is arguably Australia's most important national occasion. Every year, Australia and New Zealand mark the anniversary of the first campaign and at the same time remember all the military conflicts that followed. Thousands of miles away in Australia and New Zealand, dawn services and other events were held on Saturday morning to mark the centenary of the landings amid tight security. More than 20,000 people in New Zealand attended a service at the National War Memorial in Wellington, where Governor General Jerry Mathpraet was accompanied by Australian counterpart Peter Cosgrove. Aztec Day affirmed the qualities we prize: courage, compassion, comradeship, qualities which were placed by our troops on the Gallipoli Peninsula and by our armed forces in subsequent conflicts, Mr. Mathpraet said. He described Gallipoli as the beginning of an 8-month ordeal, an experience which was to be a turning point in the history of the nation. And we all should note, ladies and gentlemen, that Britain's Prince Charles and Prince Harry are also due to attend an ecstatic breakfast earlier today. In London, the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, who is the patron of Gallipoli Association, and Prince William will be joined by senior government and military figures to lay wreaths at the Cenotaph in Whitehall in the UK. Staying with British news, over to the UK elections, Ed Miliband has accused Prime Minister David Cameron and other world leaders of failing to stand by Libya, contributing in part to the crisis in the Mediterranean. The Labour leader said the UK had repeated the same mistakes in a post-conflict planning for Libya as we were made in Iraq, and current refugee situation could have been anticipated, he said. Conservatives denounced the remarks, and Prime Minister Cameron called them, quote, ill-judged. But Mr. Miliband rejected the claims he had politicized the issue as nonsense. Saying out his foreign policy priorities in a speech in London earlier today, Mr. Miliband also pledged to rebuild the UK's international standing, claiming Mr. Cameron had presided over the biggest loss of influence in a generation and placed the UK's future in the European Union in doubt. According to the BBC's assistant political editor Norman Smith, he said Labour was making clear that they were not blaming the Prime Minister for the recent deaths in the Mediterranean. But Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg said any suggestion of a political point scoring on the back of a total human tragedy was pretty distasteful. It's not often that I agree with a politician, ladies and gentlemen, but I think Nick Clegg is thinking in the right direction on this one. Back to the story. Mr. Miliband voted in favor of UN-authorized airstrikes against former Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi back in 2011, deciding to stop the slaughter of Libyan civilians in Benghazi. The intervention led to the collapse of the Gaddafi regime, but the country has descended into chaos since then. An estimated 800 people died when their boats sank off the Libyan coast on Sunday, while more than 35,000 people are thought to have crossed from Africa to Europe this year alone, many of them being transited through Libya and departing from there. As I stated earlier, in the speech in London, the Labour leader suggested that the UK and the wider international community had let Libya down. For more on this full story, we'll post this up later on tonight on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. Wrapping up the international headlines now, Pierre Claude Nolan, the former Speaker of the Senate in Canada, has died at the age of 64. Involved in politics since his teenage years, Mr. Nolan, a lawyer by training, was appointed to the Senate back in 1993 and became the Speaker late last year. Mr. Nolan had spoken publicly about the rare form of cancer that he was diagnosed with 5 years ago, according to the CBC in Canada. Prime Minister Stephen Harper said he was deeply saddened by the news. Mr. Nolan was remembered by the Canadian Prime Minister. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go ahead and bring that. That's our guest coming on the line there in just a couple minutes. Mr. Nolan was remembered by the Canadian Prime Minister as an affable and cultured man who never lost track of the higher interest of his fellow citizens. Senator Claude Kerrigan, a fellow Conservative and the leader of the Canadian government in the Senate, said he will be remembered by each and every one of his state's colleagues for his integrity, knowledge, wisdom, and determination. Mr. Nolan is survived by his wife Camille and 3 children, Mr. Kerrigan's statement said. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take a short break here on the program. When we return tonight, congressional candidate for the 31st District here in the state of California, Paul Chabot, joins us to discuss his second attempt to run for that seat here in the state of California, as it marks up to be one of the top 15 congressional races in 2016. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan is off tonight, and we'll be back after these messages.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Is radio.
Talk news. Talk news.
Radio.
Talk news. Talk news.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in a separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Let's get back to the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan is on assignment tonight for the SHR Weekend News. He'll be back on tomorrow's Weekender at 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific, right here on the SHR Media Networks and Pundit Press Radio. And ladies and gentlemen, before we get to our guest, I want to state that I did get his name wrong before the break. I wanted to make sure it was right. His name is Paul Chabot. Chabot, not Paul Chabot, as I stated in the break, so my apologies to our guest for that. We'll get to him in a moment. In February 2014, Dr. Paul Chabot, age 40, declared his candidacy for California's 31st Congressional District. Despite being outspent by 11-1 margin in a highly competitive 7-candidate primary, Paul earned a resounding 26% of the vote in his first run, placing him nearly 10 percentage points ahead of the second-place finisher. As a result, Paul received many endorsements from members of Congress. Locally, Paul is endorsed by dozens of locally elected officials and organizations in the state of California. Mr. Chabot is the president of Chabot Strategies. He is also an Iraq War veteran who began his reserved military intelligence career back in 2001, serving first at the Office of Naval Intelligence. Later, he worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency in conjunction with an assignment in the Pentagon, working for the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the National Military Command Center, where he identified and assessed immediate national security threats. Then in 2008, Paul returned from Iraq, where he served as an intelligence officer with the Joint Special Operations Forces. Today, he serves as the department head for Command Pacific Fleet Intelligence Reserve Unit 0194 at the rank of Lieutenant Commander. He is a fully qualified Information Dominance Warfare Officer with top secret SCI clearance. Paul has over 19 years of law enforcement experience. He served as a reserve deputy sheriff for the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department in California with specialized assignments to the Narcotics and Street Gangs Division. Paul also served full-time with the University of Southern California's Public Safety Department, where he reserved the Meritorious Serve Medal. Then in 2006, the Senate confirmed then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger's appointment, and Paul became the commissioner of the California State Parole Board for 3 consecutive terms. He is proud of his strong public safety record and his dedication towards protecting California's communities by keeping dangerous criminals behind bars. Paul also had the privilege of interning for Congressman Jerry Lewis and was later selected for the nation's prestigious Presidential Management Fellowship Program. While working for the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, Paul served in both the Clinton and 2 Bush administrations, that being George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr., where he was eventually promoted to the White House Senior Advisor for Law Enforcement, Justice, and Drug Control Programs. During his nearly 6 years in the White House, Paul completed 2 rotational assignments, one with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles targeting methamphetamine production, and one later with the U.S. State Department Office of Inspector General assessing counterterrorism and counter-narcotics programs. And we're pleased to be joined now by Paul Chabot, who is now taking a second stab at running for California's 31st Congressional District. Good evening, Paul.
Hey, thanks, Jason, for having me. Great to be with you. Thanks for that introduction. Boy, I don't know if I've got anything left to say after that.
Well, here at the Evan Miller Report, we like to state what a full person's record is, especially a former military veteran such as yourself, sir. I'd like to say, first off, we appreciate your service. We appreciate all veteran service in service for our country. I don't think we can thank our service members enough, day in and day out, for their sacrifice.
Well, you're welcome. We love doing it. We enjoy the job. We enjoy the service.
All right. Well, to start off, we have a situation going on internationally, and the our current president, who's in the White House right now, doesn't seem to know how to handle it. At least for we conservatives, that's what we think. We have the situation going on in Syria. We have the de-escalation going on in Yemen. We have destabilization in Iraq. You being being a reservist yourself in the military, what do you think of how the president is handling all of these conflicts and representing the U.S., and what would you do as congressman if you were elected?
Yes, certainly I appreciate the question. I think I can speak for many of us that have served in uniform and are veterans, that what we are seeing is utter incompetence in American leadership. Our enemies don't fear us. Our allies don't trust us. And when you have someone like our current president in the White House, it signals to the world that there is a free-for-all. And the free-for-all is a global spread of evil. When you look at ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, you name it, these organizations are growing. Not only are they conquering the Middle East, large portions of it, they are moving into major areas of Africa, Horn of Africa, and expanding. And at this rate, we will see ISIS in Latin America. And you can just imagine where that will lead us into the homeland in the next few years. The American people have a very important job in electing a president, and I hope that we don't make the same mistake again in electing somebody like our current president, because it's going to take this next president a number of years to clean up this mess. But if we put in somebody else who shares his values and his ideology, I'm very concerned about not only the future of this country, but the future of the free world. And I look at this through the lens of being a dad. I've got 4 kids, age 7, 5, 4, and 2. Now, this president brought home our troops in the Middle East way too early. We were making great strides there during the surge. Al-Qaeda was on the run, decimated by 90%. And then Obama, rather than keeping a chunk of troops there to help gather intel and continue to train the Iraqis, he created a complete void that has allowed this enemy to spread and grow unchallenged and unchecked. In essence, what this president has done has assured that I'm going to have to send my kids forward in the future to fight what we should have finished during my tenure in the military. And I say that with a very heavy heart, because many of us in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places see the losses of what many of our friends had died fighting for, and it is just utterly inexcusable. Yemen, as this president has called an example of his counterinsurgency strategy, is an absolute failure. The negotiations with Iran are deplorable. Russia expansion into the Ukraine unchecked. China growing their military, and this president is shrinking our military across the globe. Look, I don't want to be consistently pessimistic on these comments, but we've got to be realistic. And where we are today, America is at one of its weakest points we've ever been, There's no leadership in the world, and the future generation is going to suffer for this, unfortunately.
And you know what? You make a point here, and I'm sure you saw the president come out yesterday, and the president hasn't been apologetic much for anything in his 2 terms here as president. Yet he had the audacity to come out yesterday, and I say this with all honesty, Paul, that he came out yesterday and apologized for the death of 2 Americans. Yet he's never apologized for the death of the military men we lost in Benghazi, along with the bastard Chris Stevens. He used these two Americans killed over in the Pakistan-Afghanistan border back in January yesterday as political coverage because of the current investigation into his administration and into former Secretary of State and 2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. What do you say to that?
I say it's just another glaring example, and I'm shocked today that if you look at all the scandals in this administration, my gosh, what Nixon did pales in comparison to this president who still remains in office. History will judge him as the present day has, and I just think America today, Americans are very concerned about the threat. You look at the drone strike that the president apologized for. Well, we can look at that drone strike as an example of his way of thinking of how we can fight the enemy. They're using signal intelligence, signals capturing, if you will, communications on how to hit targets. What we no longer have anymore is intelligence on the ground, human intelligence, to get a better idea of targets before we hit them. And that's what's missing. We can never win a war by the air only. And look, I understand the perspective of many of our great Americans not wanting to shed blood across the world. But the other perspective is this, that wherever America has a strong presence, there has traditionally been peace in the world. And so if you look at Europe after World War II, if you look at Asia with the American bases and presence there was generational prosperity and peace. And we made the other countries foot the American bill for military. We had an opportunity here in the Middle East to really create a significant leadership role to possibly help implement peace through strength, Ronald Reagan's vision, by having the other nations pay for us, much as Kuwait did after Gulf War I. Instead, this president uprooted all of us. We have really no presence. He pulled us out of Africa, pulled us out of Yemen. The missile defense in Europe is a joke, and you can see Russia flexing their muscle. We need a true leader in 2016 as a president. I don't know who that's going to be. They're going to have an enormous job to clean up this mess and right the ship.
Paul, you mentioned the run for president. You say you're running for Congress next year in 2016 for the second time, and I don't mean to take you off guard. Why don't you run for president?
Thanks. I really appreciate the consideration. There's a lot of folks out there much more experienced than I. I want to support and fight and defend for this great country. I think Congress would be a next good step for me. I had my first run at national office in 2014. We won our primary by about 10 points and then faced a Democrat, well-funded Democrat. The Democrat Congressional Committee came in, spent about $4 million on very slanderous ads and attacked us. We didn't have much support from the National Republican Party. They didn't think the seat was winnable. We lost by just 3 points despite being outspent 8-1 in the general. We're running again, and this time the National Republican Congressional Committee has identified this seat as a top target to win back. So we're going to do all we can to win back this seat, and then in Congress in 2016, work with our Armed Services Committee, the new president. Hopefully it's going to be a good one to get America on the right track. But we're looking at a 10-year plan here to right the ship, rebuild our military, reinsert American leadership across the world, supporting our allies like Israel and our allies in the Ukraine and South Korea and Japan, we've got a lot of work to do on the international front to make sure that we're home safe here domestically.
Okay, which leads to a good two-part question here, which I sent you, and I don't often send questions pre-interview to my guest, but with Paul's recent service record and everything, I trust our recent military veterans and reservists a little bit better than I do typical politicians, so I gave an exception in his case. So he'll know which question I'm asking here. It's pretty much a two-part question, Paul. What do you think what role you should have in government, and what role should the government have in our lives, that being the American people's lives?
Yeah, I think government really should have a very invisible role domestically. We should only be focusing in on the core aspects of what our founders intended of our government. And one of those is to protect and defend this great nation. And that's what I intend to do in the United States Congress, is to make sure that America is safe and strong abroad, to do all I can to support the middle class, working families. I think tax reductions are absolutely essential to that, helping our veterans across this country. I'm very concerned with Obamacare, a national program. And my point has always been that if the government cannot run our VA system health care correctly, which in itself is national health care for less than 1% of our population, how is our government going to run health care for the rest of us? And I worry about a healthcare system that is in collapse, doctors no longer looking at general medicine. But I think the bigger picture is I worry about the values and morals that our kids are seeing today. As a dad, again, I think that when we talk to Republicans, Democrats, Independents, that as long as we talk about one essential point, and that is what kind of country, what kind of community do we want to see kids raised in, I think when we talk about it in that aspect, we should be able to lead in that sense, to get out of the way, to let parents be parents, to let schools decide what's best for schools based on their local community, with parents being involved, and the federal government getting out of the way, doing what we can to keep America strong abroad so that we can be prosperous here at home.
And what role do you think you should have in government if you are elected to Congress in the upcoming 2016 congressional elections in the 31st District?
As a public servant, I've been in a public service most of my life, but also in the private sector. I've been a reserve deputy sheriff, unpaid, 20 years, and worked in local, state, federal levels of government. And I very much love this country, and I want to do all I can to serve this country and do all I can to help lift her back up. So my role or my mission is to go to D.C., to go to Congress, to do what our founders intended, to go there to serve time, serve this country, but then come back home. I don't believe that we should be spending our entire lives in politics back in D.C. I think we go there, we do good, we come back home, and we get back invested in our local communities.
So it sounds like recent comments of the former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, who has been on this program once before, that she sounded similar comments to what yours is. Now, this is of my general opinion, and I think many Americans may agree with me. If you're a part of our government, if you're part of our Congress, you're part of our Senate, you have a government job, you don't do your job, you shouldn't get paid. Do you believe that our current politicians that are running in Congress, that being the Congress and the Senate, I know you're running for Congress, but you could speak to the senators too, because there's people on both sides of the aisle, whether they're Republican or Democrat, who get themselves in there, promise a bunch of stuff, yet they never do the stuff they say they're going to do. I'm speaking about the John Boehners, the Eric Cantors, the Mitch McConnells of the world.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the congressional side, they're running every 2 years. And so my blinders have come off after I've had a chance to see how people get elected to Congress. There's no longer elections. It's more of an auction, if you will, unfortunately, that, who can raise the most money or where does the money come from to help elevate somebody who they want to see in power. And I think on the Senate side, it's a little bit different. They're not running every 2 years. We've got to look at this process in Congress for just how much time is spent campaigning. And even when congressmen or congresswomen are supposedly legislating or working on behalf of the constituents, much of what I think they're doing is running for office again. I can point to my opponent and watch what he's doing in this district with various robocalls and smoke and mirror tactics in the district at taxpayer expense. We've got to look at this as a country, how people get elected, where the money comes from, and what is the true intent and purpose of public service. We've got a lot of work to do on that front, and I think that people speak to that consistently when we show their unfavorable numbers about Congress. We've got to do something about it. It's got to start from the ground up, and in Congress, I intend to hold people accountable. I intend to work my tail off every single day, expose the waste, fraud, and abuse, and bring this country back so the people can respect our government once again.
It's certainly a disturbing situation we got in D.C. these days because, honestly, I've been to Washington, D.C. once in my life, and I can tell you, this was as a teenager. And even as a teenager, Paul, I smelled the corruption as the plane landed at Reagan International Airport. It's there. The skies may be clear, and it may have the cleanest air in the United States, but my goodness, the corruption is there when you get into that town. What town used to be a very historical town and used to be that people talked about across the nation, it's still being talked about, Paul, but it's being talked about in a very bad way these days. I
agree. I think one of the biggest points is we've got to look at everyday, ordinary, average Americans like you and I and most good-hearted people out there. What I've learned running for federal office is it's virtually impossible for the ordinary, average American to run because you have to raise such an incredible amount of money to be noticed, if you will, to then get the support of other big players to help you then get elected. I cannot tell you how much that bothers me because it has gotten away from the intent of what our founders wanted for this great nation. And therein lies, I think, the disgust of the American people. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of trust to rebuild. I very much want to see a phenomenal Republican candidate rise to the top, become our nominee, and lead this country in the right direction. I think we have little time on our hands to get there. Time is of the essence, and this election is going to be absolutely critical.
Now, Paul, you mentioned the presidential elections. We need to elect someone who is going to not only clean up Washington, the likes of Washington, but going to clean up America. And I hear from your voice, you're a family man. You care a lot about the family. You care a lot about the morals of America. And although I'm not endorsing anyone as of yet when it comes to the presidential candidates on the GOP side, and I fully stated on this program more than once that I'm a libertarian and that the Republican Party left me. I didn't leave them in that regard. I know it might be a little early for you to predict, but in the current list of GOP presidential candidates, does anyone on that list catch your eye? Does anyone impress you in that regard? Or is there someone who isn't running or someone who's thinking about running that you think should be running for president? You've already mentioned you don't want to run. You don't think yet you're qualified enough to run as of yet.
No, I don't. Look, I very much, there's certain qualities I like of certain candidates that are running. But somebody who's not running, who I like a lot, who I think would be tremendous for today's times or where we are as a world, is Ambassador John Bolton. I very much respect his knowledge on the worldly issues. I think he just understands. He could be somebody that, as a commander-in-chief, I think our troops, soldiers, sailors, airmen could really, respect and work behind. I think there's a number of other candidates as well. I had helped Carly Fiorina when she was running in California against Barbara Boxer. Carly Fiorina is a firebrand. She's out there, has not announced yet. There's parts of her that I really appreciate as well. I think if we could take a little bit of all these candidates, we could try to mold a perfect candidate, but I think it's still very, very early to tell. But my military mindset and structure very much like somebody who's very confident, not only domestically but on a worldly level. And for me, that's why I have been impressed with Ambassador John Bolton.
I'm glad you brought John Bolton up, because, of course, John Bolton was known in the former George W. Bush administration there, Paul, and not a lot of people now, and I've heard from a lot of conservatives, mainstream Republicans like that Jeb Bush is running, but conservative Republicans don't like that Jeb is running because of his stance when it comes to the likes of Common Core, his opinions on global issues, because he supports the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership and the like. So really, we need an alternative. And I think people, they don't realize until now how actually bad probably former President George W. Bush was. Yes, he was good on certain issues when it comes to certain social issues. But really, when it came down to it, he was very much a lot like what President Bill Clinton was when he was in office.
Yeah, I think what's going to be interesting about this election cycle is at least the Republicans have a whole spectrum of candidates to look at. I mean, you really have almost every base covered in positions on the Republican side, whereas the Democrats are left with Hillary Clinton, who has tremendous baggage that she's bringing to this race, a lot of concerns just based on the nonprofit work with their husband's foundation and Benghazi and a lot of things. That right now is their only person, whereas, nobody right now is a clear front runner on the Republican side, but at least we have a number of people that are out there that we can look at and test up through this process. So in that sense, we are blessed to have options, whereas the Democrats right now appear to be stuck with somebody who I believe is fatally flawed based on all these allegations we're hearing.
And, you mentioned that you admire Carly Fiorina. Now, I have my issues with Carly, especially her view on how kids should be involved in education. And she stated in a recent article that she is for standardized testing of kids here, which would indicate, and I cover this issue on education quite a bit on my program, Paul. Do you currently, because Carly Fiorina has sure stated that she supports the Common Core educational standards, and I'm sure you've heard about this issue here in the state of California. It not only affects your congressional district, it affects everyone here in America. Here. Are you for or against those standards?
No, I'm against those standards. And look, I've got a doctorate degree in education, but I've failed every standardized test I've ever taken, and I'm very honest with that. If test scores were to define me as a human being, then on those test score factories, I would be labeled a failure. I failed the SAT, the ACT, the LSAT, the GRE, you name it. But I was always determined to never give up. I'm probably one of the worst test takers out there, but I've got a bachelor's, a master's, a doctorate, and I've worked my way up, from the ground. So I do not believe in standardized testing to judge our kids at all. I think it's been an absolute failure. I think we need to get back to reality in our schools and our high schools. We need to get back to wood shop and auto shop and trade skills. Not everybody needs to go to college, nor should they have to go to college for society to label them a success. We need to get away from that mindset. Very, very concerned with education in this country, starting at the ground level. We have a fundamental problem domestically, and we've got to get away from it to do our kids good justice.
Do you think that the current education system as it stands, and I'm speaking about the education department as itself, do you think the education department should be shut down and education should be given back to the schools locally? Because we see the corruption in Los Angeles. You live in Rancho Cucamonga. You see it in the LA Unified School District in your neighboring city of Los Angeles, which is quite neighboring to San Bernardino County, where your congressional district is located there, Paul. Do you think we need a complete wipe of the education system as we know it?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do need a transformational change, and so what I would recommend is, look, this might seem a little academic, but I believe
I don't mind smart people, Paul. I just like a good solution.
Well, I think that we spend a lot of time in these public universities just getting indoctrinated by the far left on courses that have nothing to do with our careers. What I'd like to do is speed up this process. It'll help reduce student loan debt for those who want to go on to get college if that's so they choose. But I believe high school today really should be the GEs, if you will, of our college. And when we hit college, we should be focusing on the core aspect of what we intend to do, whether it's accounting or business or something else. I think we are spending far too much time, far too much money and treasure indoctrinating ourselves to an academic program that has, in many ways, turned into a failure. The American education system was once gleaned, especially in California, as a model. We're now at the bottom percentile, and it's embarrassing that we've gotten there. I believe in local control, local school boards, but at the same time, when you look at these communities, especially in LA or big cities, well, or my city, you're not getting the parents involved anymore, unfortunately. We've got to put the onus on parents to get involved. I don't care. Look, my mom was part-time, 3 jobs, trying to survive and struggle, parents divorced, trying to put food on the table, but she was involved in our lives. We've got to get parents more involved in their kids' lives and put the onus on them, not mandate that our schools raise our kids. We've got to fundamentally shift how kids are being raised today, and it begins at the home.
It certainly does, and it seems the public school system, as we know it today, Paul, is trying to take the parents out of their lives. We're no longer allowed to read the Bible in school. We're no longer allowed to pray in school, yet we allow it, and I'm not trying to be racially insensitive. I am not trying to sound as our friends on the left would describe us, Paul, as Islamic phobic, but we allow the likes of the Islamic people to have their own little room to pray inside our schools. We allow them to read the Quran, yet our kids are not allowed to read the Bible or have access to that kind of material as we supposed to in schools. We don't even teach the U.S. Constitution in schools anymore. We're more concerned in teaching and having kids write a report on what Hitler would have done if he had won the war. And I'm speaking to World War II. So look at the ridiculous thing out of that. Kids can't even read today. They have a basic 5th grade reading level when they graduate high school, because these kids are now more concerned about what's the latest thing that Beyonce's doing on Twitter, or taking the latest photo and what they're doing at the nightclub and putting it up on Facebook. I remember at least if I'm watching old tape during the Reagan administration, how young kids like getting involved in their government, how they like to volunteer. I don't see that as much anymore. I do see kids volunteering, but they're volunteering for the wrong causes. We see kids volunteering to fight for gay rights. We see kids getting into this falsified green agenda, as we call Agenda 21 on this program day in and day out. How can we fight against this, Paul?
Well, I'm a Christian, and I think we've got to call out our church leaders. They've got to stop speaking only behind the pulpit, only behind the podium. They need to get out in their communities. We are a very silent majority, whether it's Christians or small business owners combined, but yet our numbers don't reflect that in our voting. And I would love to see our religious leaders not worry about their nonprofit status because they feel like they can't get politically involved. They can. They can spend, I think, up to 20% of their time involved, quote-unquote, politically. But we need church leaders to call out their own, to get out from the churches and more deeply in their communities and talk about the issues that are affecting our communities. I think, forget politicians, I don't see them changing it. It would be great to have a national discussion during a State of the Union speech by a good president up there to kick this thing off, but we've got to go back into our local communities and get our church leaders involved. There are some that are doing it, but it's far and few. The majority of them are not engaged, and we've got to get them more engaged.
Well, you speak about getting our moral compass, so to speak, back on track. How about the Defense of Marriage Act? President Obama struck that down. We now have, and I may have lost count of the numbers, but at least last time I checked, we have about up to 10 states now who have outlawed their no gay marriage laws and are now pro gay marriage in this country.
We've got a desensitization across this country of a chipping away at the family nucleus and family values. As a Christian, I don't want to judge the other, but at the same time, we've got to defend what is sacred to the Bible of marriage. And I think there is a clear difference and a clear delineation that we need to make there for the principle of what marriage is. I think we should welcome them all into the church as we do as Christians, but not to change from what the church is, because we have a holy obligation to do all we can. Look, we're all sinners. I'm a sinner. I make mistakes every day, but I also know that there are virtues and values, and we can be very Christian-like in doing that without moving the goalposts, without changing who we are, what we are, and what we mean. And I think as long as we look at it through the lens of being a Christian, having our values and morals, without alienating, gays for being gay, but also letting them know that, we're not going to change the values of the church, that's where we got to stand the line. And I think we can do that very courageously.
Well, you're of the same opinion then as I am. I don't mind these gay or lesbian people, as some people put it. I don't mind them getting in their relationships, because this is what the gay and lesbian community are trying to do, or trying to instill in people. We want to outlaw gay marriage. We want to outlaw lesbians from getting married. No, that's not the opinion at all, at least of myself, and I would hope people would change their mindset. My opinion is you do what you want in the privacy of your own home, but don't force your value system onto me and force me to change my lifestyle because you want to. We protect everybody in America. We just don't only protect ourselves. That is why we have the freedom of religion to believe in what we want in this nation. We have the freedom of speech as well with our First Amendment rights.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there are some extremists out there in the gay lesbian community that have taken this to a completely different level, and I think have really hurt the effort. And unfortunately, it's just become a boiling point. Hopefully, we can get some common sense back, but at the same time, as a Christian, I think as long as we approach it through that lens, we're going to be just fine. And I really hope that we can smooth over this issue without compromising the values and morals that make this country great and make us a great nation based on Christian values.
Okay. Two more questions for you, because I know you're probably a very busy night. We look at our military today. We have only 10 aircraft carriers as of right now that are in actual service, meaning, Paul, that those aircraft carriers are actually out patrolling the sea, patrolling our foreign waters and keeping an eye on things. yet we have more aircraft carriers, more ships at home that are stuck in dry dock getting repaired because of the way the president has handled our current budget. He's only passed 2 budgets in the whole time that he's been in office that I can account for. What do we do to make our military strong again, yet at the same time make sure to display to Americans that our military isn't used to go and bail people out of conflicts that have no relation to us?
Well, what we do is we like the president who respects the U.S. military, who understands the purpose of the military, and can explain that rationale to the U.S. Congress and get us back to having a peace through strength military mindset that we had in the 80s that brought down the wall in Germany. We have got to rebuild the trust in our military leadership. We've lost a lot of high-level military leaders under the Obama administration who've just given up and retired. We've lost a lot of institutional knowledge. We've got a lot of rebuilding to do, but I think it really depends on our commander-in-chief. And this commander-in-chief, based on his lack of understanding of military and his passiveness, has created the kind of military we see here today. And so it'll take another commander-in-chief who respects the military, understands the military, to bring our military to the levels that it should be.
With the current crisis going on with our military, Paul, do you think some aircraft carriers that have been decommissioned, that are sitting in mothballs, such as the former aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise, do you think they should be put back into service if we get a Republican president into office, at least until we get our current military situation of everything that is going on with our ships being in dry dock and needing these refueling, and as it is put in the military mindset, the rebuilding of some of these ships, because some of these ships have been serviced for 12, 15 years, over 2 decades, and really need this service. Are you for that?
I am absolutely for making sure that we've got strong national, international posture. I think that when we look at a carrier and how long it takes to get them out of mothball up and running with the support fleet, it's a critical component. I don't want to give a firm answer because I wonder if there are not other military Navy options that could be made available, but we know this, that whenever there is an urgency in America, we come together. We are able to do remarkable things rather quickly. The bigger problem we have is the bureaucracy and the process for how long it takes to get things done in the military or anywhere else. You might recall after the Battle of Midway and in World War II in the Pacific, we had a specific carrier that was almost sunk, decimated, but it went into dock. I believe it was Honolulu, Hawaii, rebuilt up 24/7, 365. They were working on that ship, got it back out. We've got to look at how we do business in this country. We have too much red tape, too many environmental regulations, too many processes that impede progress. And we have too many members of Congress who are looking about bringing pork back to their district for certain military apparatuses which are not relevant to today's times. We need to have a realistic view of what is absolutely essential. So my promise is I would pull together the best and brightest military minds together to look at what our nation needs to succeed and be strong. And I will say there is no replacement for a carrier. When you put a carrier out at sea, out in somebody's backyard off any coast, that's sovereign American territory where you have an immense amount of firepower that can unleash unwielding hell on our enemies and puts the fear of God into those. So there's no replacing a carrier. The short answer is, if you will, I would absolutely look at all options to making sure that we had the best available arsenal out at sea.
All right. Okay, final question. I'm sorry I made that a 2-part question, but I think this question is critical. Some people may find this interesting coming from you, Paul. Explain your belief in being part of the Freemasons movement.
So I'm a Freemason. I should caveat that with I'm a fraternity brother of Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity, joined in my undergrad, and then when I moved to Washington, D.C., and joined the Freemasons out there, and our lodge is called Fraternity Lodge. I've enjoyed the process. I've also enjoyed watching some of the shows on TV. There's a lot of different thoughts or beliefs on the Masons, but I can say it's been nothing but uplifting and honorable in my life, despite what some of these conspiracy shows are showing on History Channel. I just say I'm blessed to have had the experience and the brotherhood of being a Freemason.
What made you decide to become a Freemason? I don't mean to press you on that. There's certain people in this audience who have excuse the term some controversial thoughts when it comes to Freemasons.
Yeah, I haven't seen or felt any of that controversy in my lodge. Again, my lodge is back in Washington, D.C., but it was really for, I think, the brotherhood and the principles and values of what we were coming together. Part of our lodge, every lodge might be a little bit different, but our lodge was that we had all come from a different fraternity, or most of us had come from different fraternities, and then all coming together to work together. My primary objective in the fraternal system or Greek system has always been community service, and that's something that has always been near and dear to my heart, and it was something that carried on in my life when I worked in Washington, D.C., and brought me into the Freemasons as well.
So your military service wasn't probably one of the reasons why you joined up. You probably were a Freemason before you joined the military, if I understand correctly.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Just wanted to clear that up, because there are some people, at least your opponent may use that against you. I don't know if he used it against you back in 2014. But your race, Paul, going to be one of the top 15 to watch here in the United States. And I'm looking at your list of endorsements. You got the endorsements here, and I'm quite impressed of the list of endorsements you have here, including the NRA to say, and I know you have to update that list of endorsements there on your website, because you did have here for current speaker John Boehner, but you have stated to me that John Boehner is no longer on your list of people on your endorsements, or at least you won't allow him to endorse you, considering what his record has been as the Speaker of the House and getting things done in D.C. He's more contributing to the
for the endorsements, those were our 2014 endorsements, and now our 2016 race endorsements should be updated. Our webpage just went through an update today. So if any of your listeners go to voteforavet.com, they'll get a chance to see our current list, and there are some more updates coming as well.
All right, well, we look forward to that. And by the way, I'm just looking here as I speak here. I see you got a bastard John Bolton on here, so not only you admire John Bolton, you guys seem to know each other, it looks like.
We've never met, but we have spoken on the phone, and I'm one of 3 candidates that he's endorsed for the 2016 cycle for U.S. Congress. So we're honored to have him, and I'm honored that he reached out to me late in 2014 for support. So I have the utmost respect for him, and hope I get a chance to work with him.
All right. Any primary challengers for you yet on the GOP side before we let you go? Anyone thinking about challenging you in the 31st Congressional District at this time?
No, at this time, there's been no other names thrown in the hat, but lots of time for folks to explore it. So there always could be a few. In 2014, there were 7 in the jungle primary, 4 Democrats, 3 Republicans. So still some time to tell.
All right, folks. Well, it's time to do your research. I know 2016 may seem like it's a year away, and you know how the election rules here, Paul, in California are. you better get out there and vote, especially because I think the primaries are somewhat more important than the general elections, but especially with the new voting system we got going on here in the state of California. And it's not to conservatives' benefit. It's all catering to the liberals here in the state of California, unfortunately. So, ladies and gentlemen, check out Paul Chabot. Check out his website. What's that website one more time for our audience?
If they go to voteforavet.com.
All right, voteforavet.com, folks. Go ahead, check it out. And Paul, I'd like to have you back in about 3 to 6 months. That may seem a long time from now, but we want to check up on you, see how your campaign is doing. And obviously, a lot will be happening between now and that time. I'd like to have you back sometime.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. That's Paul Chabot, everybody. He's running for California's 31st Congressional District, one of the top 15 races in 2016. I'm Jason Miller. You're listening to the Evan Miller Report. We'll be right back after these messages with Corey Evans, Lawsuits Across America, the Entertainment Report, and we got the latest on your market news as well, coming up.
Some of America's bravest warriors are returning home wounded. Here's one of them.
My name is Norberto Lara. I served for 11 years in the United States Army. While I was on a combat patrol in Baqaba, Iraq, a rocket-propelled grenade took my arm off at the shoulder. When I came home, I felt alone. My family was around me, but I couldn't talk to them about what I'd seen and what I'd done. I remember just thinking, man, the way I am right now, I don't want to live. I was discharged from the Army, and I've been working with the Wounded Warrior Project since 2007. You don't have to be severely wounded to be with the Wounded Warrior Project. We do have a lot of guys that have post-traumatic stress disorder. Being able to share your story, I guess it kind of helps you wrap your mind around what did happen over there. Just because you have left the military doesn't mean your life is over. Because when these guys are coming home, I'm kind of leading and training them. Instead of for combat, I'm leading and training them to heal. If I come away with anything from Wounded Warrior Project, it's them giving my life back. My name is Norby, and yes, I do suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm okay.
Don't suffer in silence. Contact woundedwarriorproject.org.
Hey y'all, Cedric the Entertainer here with Niecy Nash, taking a break from shooting The Soul Man to introduce you to Patience.
Hi.
Patience is a patient at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Families never receive a bill from St. Jude for anything because all a family should worry about is helping their child live.
St. Jude won't give up until they end childhood cancer, sickle cell, and other deadly diseases.
Because of you, there is St. Jude.
Learn more at stjude.org.
What's up, everyone? Corey Evan here from the SHR Weekender. I describe the Weekender as a news magazine. You might describe it as business in the front, party in the back. I bring you the big stories of the week, the ones that matter, and help you make sense of them. But I also bring you lots of fun stories, too. That's because I know you've got weekend plans. Besides, I love doing features. I read the classifieds. I take public figures for a spin. And who else do you know who reads a game show news minute? Thought so. That's what I bring you every Saturday at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific on shrmedia.com. I'll see you on the Weekender.
St. Jude is leading the way childhood cancer is treated and defeated in communities across America.
And no family receives a bill from St. Jude, not for treatment, travel, housing, or food.
So parents at St. Jude can focus on what matters most, helping their child live.
Give thanks.
Give thanks.
Give thanks for the healthy kids in your life and give to those who are not. Go to stjude.org or shop wherever you see the St. Jude logo.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. It's now time for the latest business news on Wall Street. Here's Corey Evan with today's closing bell.
I'm guessing everyone on Wall Street has had limp lattes today. The Dow picked up 21 points at 18,080, the Nasdaq 36 points up at 5092, and the S&P 500 just added short of 5 points at 2117. Yeah, rather rainy day on Wall Street, just like here in SoCal. Yesterday I reported, according to Al Jazeera, quality Arab television in depth to America, that Comcast was working on scrapping its Time Warner deal. That was a rumor yesterday, but today the Huffington Post confirms that Comcast has scrapped their plans to merge with Time Warner in a $45.2 billion deal that would have combined the country's two largest cable and broadband providers, the company said today. The move comes 2 days after the FCC said it planned to oppose the deal, joining lawyers from the Justice Department who felt it would not help customers. No, it wouldn't have. The FCC said it would issue a hearing designation order that would prolong the deal, making it more difficult and expensive for Comcast. On Friday, FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler said the merger posed unacceptable risk to competition and innovation. Quote, "Today we move on," Comcast Chairman and CEO Brian L. Roberts said in a statement. Today. Of course, we would have liked to bring out great products to new cities, but we structured this deal so that if the government didn't agree, we could walk away, unquote. In a separate statement, Time Warner Cable CEO Robert D. Marcus called his company a one-of-a-kind asset. But the Comcast-Time Warner Cable merger faced vehement opposition from many who claimed such a deal would stifle competition by creating a monopolistic beast. As it is, Americans have limited options compared to other developed countries for buying cable or internet. A combined Comcast and Time Warner would have represented 54% of the entire U.S. broadband market. 2 weeks ago, Eric Holder, the BS artist, authorized the Justice Department to sue to block the merger, a department official told the Huffington Post today. The dead merger marks a second failure for Comcast in just the past year. The Philly-based behemoth suffered a loss when the FCC adopted open internet rules that enshrined in law net neutrality, the principle that broadband providers cannot block, throttle, or create special fast lanes for any internet content. Comcast vehemently opposed the regulation. Well, that's one thing that came of this. Comcast at least opposed something that we opposed here at the Evan Miller Report. But we digress, ladies and gentlemen, because this would have been a bad deal. Thankfully, it's over. Amazon is two companies in one. The first company is the retail operation, boxes with the smiley face, Kindles, door-to-door grocery services, the never-ending quest to get people to sign up for Prime. The second is the logistics provider, the ones that set up stuff that competes with iCloud. The latest financial report shows that second personality seems to show more signs of life these days than the first. The run rate for Amazon Web Services is up to $5 billion a year. First quarter revenue came to $1.5 billion with operating income of $265 million. Granted, AWS only represents a fraction of total revenue, which came to $22.7 billion. Still, the operating income for the rest of the company is up to $440 million, or only around 2 times the operating income of AWS. In short, ladies and gentlemen, they seem to be focusing more on the background stuff than the consumer. As this article from Forbes is titled, Amazon's Split Personality, or Why Consumers Aren't the Future. Oh dear, is what I have to say about this. And under new leadership, Abercrombie & Fitch is giving its namesake store and sister brand Hollister a new, less sexualized look. Well, it's about time, because I get uncomfortable walking up to one of those stores. This from BuzzFeed. The company said in a statement that the brand is moving to a customer-centric store operating model and making it more convenient, friendlier, and easier to shop, which will include adjusting its infamous phantasmagoria of heavy scent, dark lighting, and loud music, and desexualizing its staff and marketing materials. Thank goodness. And the men will need to put a shirt on. Hollister is ditching its shirtless lifeguards for store openings and store events, and Abercrombie & Fitch will no longer have shirtless models. Abercrombie's Fierce Cologne, however, will continue to feature a shirtless model, consistent with the fragrance industry, as they are quoted. And on that now, I think we better wrap up the business report. And I'll go ahead and send it back to you, Jay, and I bet you've got a lot to say about this.
Well, certainly some good news there, Corey Evan, in regards to that. Instead of sexualizing our teens in America, Abercrombie and French is actually doing something right. Corey Evan with the business news. Thank you very much for that. And as we stated, Corey is on assignment for the Weekender, so he did record some segments for us today. So we're going to go ahead and go right into his lawsuits across America.
I thank you, Jay. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and come to order. Lawsuits across America for this Friday are now in session. The first item on the docket, a Columbia University student sued the school, according to the AP Thursday, saying it failed to protect him against harassment when a female student went public with claims he raped her after school and law enforcement authorities rejected her case. The lawsuit was filed in Manhattan federal court by Paul Nungesser, a German citizen who said one-time friend Emma Sulkowitz has repeatedly and publicly called him a serial rapist, resulting in national and international media attention. Defendants include the school, its board of trustees, President Lee C. Bollinger, and Professor John Kessler. The lawsuit sought unspecified damages. Robert Hornsby, a Columbia spokesman, said the school had no comment. Email messages requesting comment from Bollinger and Kessler were not immediately returned. The suit was filed 3 days after a judge tossed out another gender-based lawsuit brought by a male student against Columbia University. In his suit, Nungesser said a Columbia-owned website had presented as fact that he sexually assaulted Sulkowitz, a senior majoring in visual arts. It said that the school allowed Sulkowitz to carry a mattress into classes, the library, and campus-provided transportation as part of her senior thesis, that Kessler approved for the mattress project for her course credit, and that Sulkowitz's pledge to carry her mattress to graduation may prevent Nungesser and his parents, who'd like to fly from Germany, from participating in the graduation ceremonies. Okay, for anyone to carry a mattress around, whether or not it's a class project, number one, you gotta be a little bit nuts to do that, Miss Sulkowitz. And number two, I hope you have enough strength to do that, and enough space, and enough confidence to deal with people laughing at you for carrying a mattress around all day.
Okay, shut up, Mr. Evan.
But I was just getting into my stride.
Shut up!
Right, moving on. It's a common practice at most strip clubs. Customers pay extra for lap dance their private VIP booths. Yeah! But at Paradise Showgirls in the City of Industry, exotic dancers had to pay the owner of a club a rental fee of $14 for a lap dance booth or $100 for a VIP booth. A class action lawsuit in California was subsequently filed. On Thursday, an LA County jury ruled that the club's rental fees were illegal and that the club owes hundreds of dancers $6.5 million. Attorney Ernest Franceschi represents Paradise Showgirls. He says his client is entitled to rental fees. Franceschi says his client isn't giving up and plans to appeal. Sorry to make you uncomfortable again, Jay, but the news is the news, and every raunchy detail makes it into the public eye these days, although I wish it wouldn't. And here's a story I meant to bring you yesterday, but I'll go ahead and bring it to you today. The Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency is violating the rights of applicants for jobless benefits by using an automated system to file unjustified fraud charges and penalties against them. This according to a federal lawsuit brought to us by the AP. The Sugar Law Center filed the suit in U.S. District Court in Detroit on behalf of the United Auto Workers Union, and 7 individuals, it says, were wrongly denied benefits or threatened with fines because of the automated system. The suit says Michigan's robo-adjudication system violates applicants' constitutional rights to due process, as well as the federal Social Security Act. State officials were reviewing the lawsuit Wednesday and unable to comment on the specific allegations, according to the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency spokeswoman Linda Robinson. She defended the state's updated program for processing and evaluating claims. Among those suing the agency is Amanda Balma, who worked at a nursing home in Okemos until she became pregnant and managers dismissed her in 2014, the complaint said. It said managers said they couldn't accommodate a 10-pound lifting limit. Well, managers, that's why you put some people in clerical duties, such as receptionists. I mean, someone's got to answer the phone. I mean, I don't want to talk to a robo-lady all the time. Hello, you have reached the Lawsuits Across America automated desk. For English, press 1. For Japanese, press 2. For potato salad, please press your nose and say honk. And on that note, I will declare today's Lawsuits Across America case dismissed.
Corey Evan with tonight's Lawsuits Across America. The only question I got for you, Corey, is how do I get that potato salad delivered? By pressing your nose. That's an interesting concept. I think that is going to have to be discussed in our green room later on after the broadcast. Corey Evan with tonight's Lawsuits Across America. Thank you very much for that. All right, folks, want to note on some political news that is happening over in Washington, D.C. today. And we start off with the Republicans seen scrapping Paul Ryan's Medicare plan and a U.S. budget push. Aiming to acquire more budget powers and take a swipe at Obamacare, Republicans will likely scrap a proposal that stirred controversy and helped lodge Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan on the national stage, which is privatizing the Medicare health program. Ryan's bold Medicare premium support plan will be sacrificed to ensure passage of Congress' first full budget in 6 years and allow Republicans a rare opportunity to use a powerful procedure tool to ease passage of other legislation. Dropping the fiscal conservative signature plan, which had little chance of enactment, is one sign of how the Republican-controlled House and Senate are trying to show they can govern effectively as they seek to win the White House in 2016. Well, the jury's still out on that, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, Republicans are hoping to use the power known as budget reconciliation to pass a bill to repeal or replace President Obama's Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, a long-standing goal of the party. For many House Republicans, a shot at dismantling Obamacare has been the overarching budget goal, eclipsing other partisan policy proposals driven by what establishment Republicans are calling Tea Party conservatives to slash spending on costly federal benefits programs. While Obama would be sure to veto such a bill, he could be forced to compromise more with the Republicans if a Supreme Court ruling on the legality of federal Obamacare subsidies goes against the government upcoming in June. And that's the highlight of the D.C. political news. Now it's time to go to Corey Evan tonight, and he has your entertainment news, including the death of one of the twins who starred in the program Everybody Loves Raymond. Corey, take it away.
I thank you, Jay, and I promise you I've at least tried to remove all sex appeal from today's entertainment news. Sawyer Sweeten, who played one of Ray Romano's twin sons in the CBS comedy Everybody Loves Raymond, has died. He was just 19. Sweeten committed suicide according to The Blaze and the AP. At least that's what Madeline Sweeten, his sister, said in a statement. There were no other details. Madeline and Sawyer's twin brother Sullivan all played the children in the sitcom's fictional Barone family. The hit comedy aired for 9 seasons before ending in 2005. Sawyer was a toddler when the series began. In a statement, Madeline, who's 4 years older than Sawyer, said the family was requesting privacy. Both of Sweeten's on-screen parents, Ray Romano and Patricia Heaton, also released statements expressing their grief over the 19-year-old's death. Patricia particularly tweeted, "Sawyer Sweeten was a funny and exceptionally bright young man. He has gone from us far too soon. A very sad end to a very short life." And from the Toronto Sun, some of Oprah Winfrey's favorite things are going on the auction block. The host and billionaire is selling more than 500 items, including furniture, artwork, and designer clothing, with proceeds going to the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy Foundation, Leslie Hindman auctioneers said in a press release. The items for sale Saturday mostly come from Winfrey's Chicago apartment. Winfrey recently announced she relocated her studio headquarters from Chicago to L.A. I wonder why she'd do that, because there's no water here, but anyway. Wipeout. Hindman expects the auction to raise at least $800,000. The estimated price of Winfrey's stuff ranges from about $50 for designer sunglasses to a Richard Edward Miller painting worth $120,000. Antique furniture, home gym equipment, fancy pens, glassware, and more than a Lil Chanel are also up for sale. I bet the sackheads want to buy into some of that, just so they can at least abuse the stuff and brag about it on the next Sackheads radio show, Wednesdays 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific on shrmedia.com. Yeah, it's a little shameless promotion of our friend's radio show, Jay. I digress. And I also digress of bringing you a story about Oprah Winfrey, but it's worth noting that this stuff is up for sale. just in case you wanted to buy something and hope that she has seller's remorse later. And nearly 30 years after the release of The Dark Knight Returns, and almost 15 after The Dark Knight Strikes Again, Frank Miller is coming back to DC Comics for a third installment in his series of stories about an older Batman in a world of corruption. It'll be out this fall. The series will come out twice each month. The preview art for the series combines a Miller-drawn image from The Dark Knight Returns with a Superman logo that is dripping blood, somewhat reminiscent of the cover of the polybag for Superman number 75, The Climax of the Death of Superman. Clearly, that would indicate the series has some loose connection to Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, which itself is quite clearly heavily inspired by The Dark Knight Returns. This story brought to us by the Comics Alliance, I have already sent to Jason to post up on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report, and I bet some of you are already interested in this one. And just to remind you what's coming to the box office this weekend, Ex Machina with Alicia Vikander and Oscar Isaac, The Age of Adeline with Blake Lively, and Little Boy with Emily Watson. That's your entertainment report for today. I hope to entertain you tomorrow on the SHR Weekender at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific, right here on shrmedia.com. And this week, it's a little bit of food and drink at the Wheel of Misfortune. Don't worry, you won't get drunk listening to this show. You'll just have a bit of a laugh. Am I right or am I right, Jay?
Oh, you're certainly right, Corey. Humor abounds with the SHR Weekend News. As he mentioned, 3 Eastern, 12 Pacific. Check it out here on shrmedia.com. If you can't listen to it live, listen to it on podcast on Pundit Press Radio and, of course, the SHR Spreaker. Go to Spreaker.com, search Sackheads Radio. And, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Evan Miller Report. That is the Evan Miller Report for this Friday, April the 24th, 2015. For Corey Evan and all of us here at SHR Media, we wish you a great night. Coming up next is the National Weather Forecast with the BBC Met Office's Sarah Keith Lucas. Again, for all of us here at SHR Media, we wish you a good day, and I will talk to you on Monday, same time, same station, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, right here on the SHR Media Networks. Special thanks again to Paul Chabot, who is running in the 31st Congressional District, for joining me earlier tonight. Good night, everybody, and now the weather.
Contrast in the weather across North America for the coming few days. Now, it has been pretty chilly towards the northeast. Temperatures in this part of the world will be gradually rising through the weekend. Further south, we've got an area of low pressure and associated weather fronts shifting their way gradually eastwards through the lower Mississippi Valley, on in towards the Great Lakes and the central mid-Atlantic as well. So the Carolinas, for instance, prone to some torrential downpours, all down to that low-pressure system. Meanwhile, further west, it's going to be a story of sunshine and scattered showers, so pretty unsettled weather for the likes of parts of Washington State and Oregon as well. For British Columbia, though, a bit of a respite, I think, on Saturday. A drier window in the weather here, but rain waiting in the wings. That will sweep in during the course of Sunday. Further south through Washington State, Oregon, on into California. It's sunny spells and scattered showers, but none of those showers really reaching Southern California, where we really could do with that rain. There is further rain continuing in Vancouver, Seattle and Portland through the course of Sunday and on into Monday. Los Angeles stays dry and those temperatures on the rise once again. It's not as cold as it has been towards New York through the course of Saturday. To the south of that, though, we're going to be seeing this heavy rain from Chicago down towards Raleigh to some pretty torrential downpours across the Carolinas. The southern half of Florida remains generally dry with just 1 or 2 lighter showers. There's further rain into Montreal by the time we get to Monday, mainly dry and cloudy in New York.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.